Well, go ahead and call this meeting to order. Be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purposes of discussing the following: discussion or consideration or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplinary, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1. Adjustment and Appeals Board. 2. Economic Development Authority. 3. Parks and Recreation Commission. 4. Social Services Board. Is there a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Is there a motion to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Oh, yes, right, whatever.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed? Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County hereby certifies, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements by Virginia law or discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
While I was there, yes.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to draw folks' attention to the Memorandum of Agreement with DEQ, which is on their agenda this evening. The reason it's back on our agenda is out of concern of transparency and to correct a simple error that occurred. 2 weeks ago, our board voted on the MOA. It had been placed on our website and provided to board members in their packets, which complies with any legal obligation the board may have been under. However, the email that was sent out to citizens as a courtesy did not contain the MOA. Because this board believes in transparency of government, all 7 members decided to postpone the execution of the agreement and place it back on our agenda for the meeting. In golf terms, this is an opportunity for a mulligan or a do-over. We as board members have even had more information than we had 2 weeks ago, some of which is in the communication our staff has had with DEQ. Specifically, other than moving the date to October 22nd, DEQ will not agree to alter or amend the agreement. We have also had the benefit of the emails that we've received and hearing from speakers this evening about this issue. Hopefully, with the additional information, the board will make the best decision for the citizens of Montgomery County. That being said, the next item on our agenda is invocation, and I will observe a moment of silence. And at the end of that, I've asked the county administrator to lead us in the pledge.
Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
The next item is public address, and this is the board's opportunity to listen to citizens, not just those who've signed up, but we're going to listen to those in first order, but it's not our turn to respond. Many times during the course of this evening, you're going to be forced to listen to what we have to say. This is the time where we need to listen to what you have to say. The first speaker for public address is Robert Goldstein. Sir, would you please come forward? Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Robert Goldstein, 1976 Big Vein Road, Blacksburg, Virginia, 24060, in case you want to write to me. Regarding restoring Big Vein Road to priority number 1 on the Rural Edition priority list, dear members of the Board of Supervisors, we as residents of Montgomery County, and in particular Big Vein Road, are requesting the following. The Board of Supervisors fulfills its mandate set forth in Resolution R-FY-09-155 and restore Big Vein Road to its previously obtained position as priority 1 on Montgomery County's Rural Edition priority list. I'm just going to read an excerpt from that resolution. Be it further resolved, Big Vein Road will not be restored to the Rural Edition priority list until all right-of-way and line-of-sight issues are resolved and presented to Montgomery County. Please note the following. The question before the board that we are requesting is not a matter of accepting Big Vein Road into the Rural Edition program as if we were a newcomer, but restoring Big Vein Road to priority 1 as the resolution reads. The line of sight and right-of-way issues have been resolved and presented to Montgomery County as criteria set forth in the resolution. As far as we understand, paving Big Vein Road was an approved and funded project and was suspended due to the line of sight issue. Big Vein Road serves a similar population as Sterling Road and considerably more than Daisy Road, which are in the same locality, and both are paved and promote safe passage to and from houses that have been approved as building sites by Montgomery County. Montgomery County continues to issue building permits on Big Vein Road as if it were a subdivision, and emergency vehicles run the risk of being unable to service residents due to the narrow one-lane passage on the road. In conclusion, we thank the combined efforts of Montgomery County and VDOT that resulted in eliminating the extreme safety hazard that existed at the intersection of McCoy Road and Big Vein Road due to a lack of line of sight. We now encourage that same synergy to be demonstrated by fulfilling its own mandate to restore Big Vein Road to priority 1 in the county's Rural Edition program. Definition of restored: to put back to a former place or a former position or rank. Respectfully submitted, Robert Goldstein. And I do want to thank the board for all that they have done in eliminating the dangerous intersection there, not just for the residents of Big Vein Road, but anyone traveling McCoy Road, and thank you for that. And when this comes up for a vote, which I hope is soon, you'll consider what we've presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker that signed up is Linda Majors. Would you please state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Linda Majors, 2620 Mount Tabor Road, Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm going to be talking about the MOA. I really appreciate the fact that you did not, that you held up on this so that you could get citizen input. I really appreciate that. I want to say that as of this afternoon, the stormwater pollution prevention plan is still not up for spread 9 and 10 on the Virginia DEQ website. And this was, so the only change that DEQ was willing to make in the MOA was changing this date to October 22nd, which would give 30 days supposedly from when they were supposed to have that up. They've got other stuff up, but not that. This whole process, this is a way of pointing out that this whole process is way too rushed. There's not the data there. There shouldn't be any impetus for the county to sign something when the data is not there, and they haven't even had any time to look at it yet because the rest of the data for spread 9 and 10 just came up on the 22nd. some of the changes that we want, they were basically just additions. Things that I thought would be really helpful and reasonable to take care of the citizens of this county. I had the enjoyable task of showing Scott Woodrum, the, oh man, the title's gonna be wrong, Director of Engineering and Stormwater Solution,
Environmental Services.
Environmental Services, thank you. Showing him Slusher's Chapel Conservation Site. And I appreciate the job he's doing, but this goes back to what Mary Biggs has said about Interstate 81 and the county personnel, firefighters and everybody else that works hard, and they're taken away from their county jobs because of accidents and other things with the on I-81. He said that when he was hired in December, I believe, of 2016, that there was supposed to be another person that was going to be hired, and that's still coming. So in my mind, that means that he doesn't have extra time on his hands to go, you know, traipsing around whenever there might be a problem out here. So to put into this contract something like MVP is going to be paying for extra personnel so that the county can hire people to specifically deal with this pipeline seems totally reasonable and sane to do that, because there will be problems. Just in Slusher's Chapel Conservation Area, the DEQ, again, June 1st, asked MVP to list all the perennial, ephemeral, and intermittent streams, which would catch everything. June 1st. What MVP answered was that there are only 5 in the county. I specifically know that there's an unnamed tributary, which is counted. It's perennial on Hutton's property. There's an unnamed tributary, and that goes into Mill Creek. There's an unnamed tributary on Tom Triplett property that goes into Mill Creek that wasn't mentioned, and there's Mill Creek itself that's crossed. They were supposed to say if there was going to be any land disturbance within 50 feet of any stream, of any perennial, intermittent, or ephemeral stream. They did not mention that. So again, the data is really not there, and there shouldn't be any reason for the county to be forced into making a decision before all the data is there. I'm seeing that flashing green light. I think that means something, but, right?
1 minute
One
left.
minute, okay. The DEQ hasn't permitted yet. It seems like this agreement would be premature until they've made a decision, and there's certainly a lot of data that they don't have. Again, I encourage you to hold pause on this, let the other counties, the citizens of other counties are working on this. Let's get the best agreement possible for the citizens everywhere. In fact, I wanted to tell you that a citizen just came back from the beach and said there were 15 trucks with 3 42-inch pipes on them going from Route 66 all the way to West Virginia on 64. There were 15 of them in his travels from 64 to 66 on I-81. That shows what's going to happen here. We need to get this right. We need to have personnel to be monitoring this if this is going to happen. Thank you.
Yep.
The next person on the list is Elizabeth Struthers. Is it Malvern? Thank you.
Elizabeth Struthers Malvin, 1391 Breckenridge Drive, Blacksburg. I'm reading selections from a letter I sent to each of you on September 23rd. I'm happy to know that you are on record as opposing the proposed MVP, which would endanger our environment, perhaps especially our water, our roads, our scenic beauty, and thus our tourism, our land and home values, and thus our tax base, all without adding any value to our county. I consider your over-hasty decision to agree to the DEQ proposed MOA out of character with your previously confirmed opposition to MVP. There are many questions that can be raised about the specifics of the DEQ proposed MOA, but my questions are the prior ones concerning with whom the board should enter into such agreements. When you sign a memo of agreement with another party, the first thing you think about, or at least ought to think about, is what you know about the other party, especially if it is the other party who has drawn up the terms of the agreement without any input from you. Obviously, the party who draws up the agreement can be assumed to draw it up in favor of their own interest. And if they are resistant to any changes at your suggestion, it is clear that the so-called agreement is in no way mutual. And what do you know about the Virginia DEQ? Although the published mission of the DEQ asserts that it protects and enhances Virginia's environment and promotes the health and well-being of the citizens of the Commonwealth, this has not been borne out by its recent actions. In carrying out its assigned duties in regard to the water certification of the proposed MVP, DEQ has 1. Initially announced that it would require certifications of impacts of each individual segment of the MVP that would cross or affect waterways. 2. Then backed away from that promise and abdicated full responsibility for this evaluation to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which only requires a blanket permit for all crossings. 3. Allow MVP to delay submitting relevant information. 4. Shorten the public comment period from what would be normal for such a complicated project. 5. Held a minimum number of public hearings. 6. In these and a number of other ways, streamline the approval process at the request of and for the convenience of MVP, the very corporate entity that DEQ is charged with examining with care for the sake of the environment of Virginia's citizens. What about the other party implied in the agreement, MVP, LLC? Are they trustworthy? MVP would like us to think that they have a clean slate. They are a new limited liability company put together for the purpose of building this pipeline. But one of the parent companies for MVP is EQT, which is on record in Pennsylvania for devastating destruction of the environment. In addition, you have personal experience of how difficult it has been to get straight answers from MVP officials from the very beginning. Is there any reason to think that MVP's future behavior will be any better than its past behavior? One should also ask, why would the DEQ be seeking an agreement with the Board of Supervisors of the counties to be crossed by the proposed MVP, even before the water certification has been issued? Is DEQ worried that their actions in relation to MVP are going to come under scrutiny from citizens and then in the courts? We know that DEQ knows that their decisions will be tested in court, and they are aware of recent events in West Virginia and North Carolina. So of course DEQ would be happy to have other government entities sign on to share responsibility, blame, and cost as things unfold. Fortunately, you have not yet signed the MOA with DEQ, and you are in an easy position to rescind your earlier, hasty, and non-transparent vote on it. If you think the DEQ is offering you a gift of cooperation, consider the gift of the Trojan horse. According to Homer's Iliad, after a long drawn-out war, the Greeks seem to be giving up and preparing to sail away from Troy, leaving behind the Trojan horse as a gift to the gods. Although some Trojans say, beware the Greeks bearing gifts, the majority prevails. The gates are opened, and the horse brought inside the city is the victory trophy. In the night, the Greek warriors, hidden inside the horse, come out, open the gates to their waiting Greek warriors, and destroy the city. Although the Trojans fight valiantly, it is too little too late. They learn that they should have paid more attention to who was giving the so-called gift. And so should you. I urge you not to sign the MOA presented to you by the DEQ. The DEQ has its reasons for soliciting your support. DEQ has a lot at stake and a lot to protect concerning its own actions, but so do you. You have to protect the citizens of Montgomery County. With other counties, you have declared your opposition to MVP as not in the interest of our county. Don't be the first and possibly only county to sign an MOA with a DEQ that is yet to prove it is up to its job of protecting the environmental quality of Virginia. You need to be up to doing your own job of protecting Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Margaret Roston.
It's Margaret Roston, 2124 Mount Tabor Road, Blacksburg, Virginia. I know you guys all missed my 5-page letters. My computer's been down and my email doesn't work. So I'll go over some of the highlights, but please do read this. Quickly, I'm going to mention something about Mount Tabor Road because we're all focused on DEQ and so forth. Mount Tabor Road, I came up with an idea. I know the through traffic is really a bad idea, but I know Roanoke apparently voted for not allowing through traffic. What about a weight limit restriction? Is that a possibility? How many of you are familiar with where I live, which is where the bamboo is on the curve on Mount Tabor Road? I planted that bamboo to try to hold the sinkhole. The road is 2 lanes wide, sort of. It's a farm road, 2 lanes wide between 2 sinkholes. If we have enough heavy vehicles going over that, it's going to break. We've all been praying that the thing keeps going because obviously nobody has the money to build a bridge to connect Mount Tabor Road again. So we don't want it to break. And that's similar all over the place. So if we have weight limits on these side roads, that might be useful. Particularly, somebody's been violated now and then for one big truck, but when you have consistently lots of construction going on, they should be much smaller trucks and so forth. And that would help limit how many big trucks try to get around the curve to the curve down in that we're worried about, where the tractor trailers and mobile homes get stuck. That's something to think about. Anyway, back on the MOA issue. I went to the DEQ meetings. I was impressed by some of the DEQ members. I'm very nervous about the whole coordination between MVP and all these government entities, that we little people like us out here have no clue what's going on. Anyway, if any MVP LLC customers will not pay the cost of natural gas when all the below list costs are factored in, the natural gas is not a viable alternative to renewable energy sources. DEQ and other entities need to see this as a reality and shut down this project. Skipping through my letter here a little, DEQ must do its job and require MVP LLC design very well thought out methods of dealing with each of the thousands of microenvironments the pipeline will directly and indirectly impact. They need to do this before any construction starts going. Those 42-inch pipes going down the road, I hope they're not started somewhere in West Virginia. DEQ must be told MVP LLC should not be allowed to rely upon mitigation to be the plan rather than actually going through the time, effort, and cost of doing the job as correctly as humanly possible during construction and forever with top-notch maintenance and monitoring, all at MVP LLC's expense. And it needs to be monitored objectively with people like you guys having control of who's doing the monitoring, MVP paying the cost. It's a cost of their doing business. I'm going to skip around here a little bit. The taxpayers and individuals should not have to hope that MVP LLC stays profitable so it can pay for the damage and mitigation. The DEQ is supposed to be ensuring that there is adequate, safe drinking water. Please emphatically remind them of that. Remind the DEQ that we now have safe water, and that the MVP LLC needs to escrow funds now before any construction starts. The funds need to provide water lines immediately to all the homes impacted and to pay for whatever filtering is needed in perpetuity for damage to personal and community water sources. We all know they admit to 2% sedimentation rate. You add that up over 20 years, that's a lot of sediment that's ending up in the reservoirs for Roanoke and Salem and everybody else, as well as our personal wells. I hope that you do get a chance to read through all this. Let's see. Basically, please be sure that DEQ insists that the MVP LLC provide a very thorough plan of how they will safely abandon this pipeline in the future and where these funds will be kept in escrow. These funds must be supplemented as costs to close such a pipeline safely increase. There needs to be a plan. There is none that I know of for closing this toxic dump. Also, I am not a religious person in terms of going to an organized religious set in the sense that kind of religion. However, I do notice signs and answers to prayers and hopes and all this other stuff. Think of the level 2 earthquake that occurred a few weeks ago. Okay, we weren't listening. DEQ wasn't listening. FERC isn't listening. So of course we got a number 4. A level 4 showed up. It cracked. I was sitting next to somebody the other day who told me that she was in a classroom in Giles and the wall cracked. She was not near the epicenter, as near to the epicenter as the pipeline route is. Then the Washington Monument was miles and miles away from the one in Richmond, and it broke. What I want you to think of right now, think of what's going on in Mexico City, or Mexico rather, with that earthquake. I believe that was very similar to the one that occurred around 1900 in Giles County. Please remind DEQ of that.
Thank you.
Don't want a pipeline.
Thank you.
It's not.
The next speaker is Louise Gay. Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yes, it's Louisa Gay, 3925 Horse Farm Road, Blacksburg, Virginia. First, I'd like to thank all of you all for the statement that you read earlier this evening and for your continued support in fighting this pipeline. It's very important. It is imperative that the DEQ, Montgomery County, affected landowners, and professional engineers review the documents submitted by MVP for Montgomery County, which was just 3 days ago, only 3 days. And I provide one example of something that I found in that review. It's in Spread 9, Erosion and Sediment Control Plan 1 of 2. It is a variance request for the length of the trench. And I'm reading a quote. The phase of construction that begins the heart of the construction activities is the trenching phase. In order to maintain the production levels necessary to complete the project in a safe and timely manner, trenching needs to be a non-stop activity. Once trenching starts, the contractor will follow directly behind the excavations to begin the stringing and bending the pipe. The next phase, welding, is a key component to the entire construction process to meet timely completion of the project. Contractors can weld up to 1,800 feet per day. Therefore, it is necessary to make enough trench open to be able to continue to string, bend, and weld pipe without any delays or downtime to facilitate implementation of the project in an efficient manner. MVP proposes to have a maximum of 3 contiguous miles of trench open per spread at any time. Then, in the next paragraph, the 3 miles becomes 4 miles. They state, in addition to the main construction effort on Spread 9, we're in Spread 9, MVP anticipates that 8 specialized crews will be working on water body and wetland crossings, road bores, and steep slope areas, which would include an additional mile of open trench. This would result in a total aggregate open trench length of 4 miles, 21,120 feet for Spread 9. The DEQ limits open trenches to 500 feet at one time, 500 feet. So the request of MVP is 42 times greater than what the DEQ allows. I'm certain the DEQ made this ruling for a reason. With 4 miles of open trench, the wildlife trapped and killed could be significant because this trench will be 10 feet deep and 8 feet wide. For those of us that own livestock, should they escape the temporary fencing that MVP is supposed to put up, these animals could become trapped and injured, requiring expensive veterinary care or possible euthanasia. It is also possible that companion animals, meaning cats and dogs, could become entrapped as well. And if there is water in the trench from a significant rainfall event, this could result in drowning of many animals, whether wild or domestic. And needless to say, curious people, curious children, and 10, 12-year-old boys and girls running out there in the woods, they drop off and fall into a trench. I don't know how they're going to get out. With something as controversial as 4 miles of open trench, 10 feet deep, 8 feet wide, the board should wait, which I know you are, but this safety issue needs to be resolved by the DEQ, so it's another good reason to wait. Now, the last comment I wanted to make is still in relation to this, but it's somewhat of an offshoot. The safety fencing that MVP will be using, the orange checkerboard type stuff that we see all the time on the roadways, is only on the edge of the construction right-of-way, which is basically 100 feet on either side. But it's only for a distance of 100 feet on either side of a residence. So if during a 4-mile open section, let's say you have 10 residences, you're only going to have that temporary fencing around that trench for 100 feet on either side of the house. So a homeowner's dogs or cats could easily fall into these trenches, as well as stated, small children if you can't keep them out of the area. But that means parents have to be very, very vigilant about watching that. But obviously with only a 10-foot safety fence, there will be a lot of wildlife that will have access to these trenches. And again, as somewhat of an offshoot here, when MVP is constructing this fast and the slash accumulates on the side of the right-of-way, the slash is the trees, the rubbish, everything else like that they're clearing. They put it off to one side, and that becomes a perfect habitat for wildlife. So wildlife will stay there, and with wildlife often brings rabies. Just
Thank you.
saying. And Virginia is the second most...
Thank you.
Well, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Rabies is prevalent in Virginia.
Our next speaker is Mr. Adams, Thomas Adams. There was one speaker that looks like she marked her name out, and that was Bonnie, and I can't read the last name, but
Triplet.
that name looks to be marked out, so I didn't call that name. Mr. Adams?
Thomas Adams, 1724 Sage Lane, Blacksburg, 24060. I sent emails opposing expediting the MOA, and I'm not sure that it's actually needed. And as Elizabeth earlier stated, there's a strong possibility that the DEQ and the Water Control Board are basically using it as a way to share blame later on. I think it's a very real concern. Many of us have stated over time the problems with the pipeline, the environmental consequences. That's well established and well known. They're very real concerns. I think that the best strategy is to delay as possible signing the MOA, and if possible, not even submit one. And in fact, possibly submit a protest to it and stating the reason why you aren't buying into it. That's basically all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Was I incorrect, or did someone else mark the name out, Ms. Trippett? Oh, okay. Now, that's all the speakers that were signed up to speak, and you don't have to speak just about the MOA or rural additions. You can come address the board about anything you would like. Is there any other speakers who would like to come forward and address the board? If all of y'all would start coming up and just have a seat on the front row, and I'll just call you in the order that you come up.
Hi, board members. My name is Cletus Bohan. I live in Elliston, Cove Hollow Road area. My address is 6210 Yellowfinch Lane. I too am here to ask you to pause on this vote. We know that the other counties are holding off to get more information. I feel like we should do that too. Everybody made a lot of good comments. I agree with most all that they said, or everything that they said, about we do need more people to watch over this criminal company that's historically criminal. If there's a problem in Mount Tabor and we need assistance in eastern Montgomery County, this one person is not going to be able to handle all this for sure. And I also agree that the taxpayers of Montgomery County should not have to pay for all this, that MVP should be responsible for having more people on watching out for our goods. Somebody brought up a question about weight limits on the bridges. On Cove Hollow Road, there is 2 single-lane bridges, and I'm not sure the weight limits on those, but it can't be too much. I know dump trucks go across it, but I don't know if I've ever seen a tractor trailer come across through there or not. But there are two of these very small bridges on Cove Hollow Road. We should look into that. Somebody else mentioned something about the unnamed tributaries that were not identified. I have one on my property that runs down Cove Hollow Road. Both of these bridges cross that unnamed tributary. It was not identified in the environmental impact statement as even being there. So anyway, I agree with everybody here. I hope y'all take more time and get more information on this and hold off on the vote tonight. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Would you please come forward and state your name? You have 5 minutes.
For the chairman, I am not David Dyer, I am Del Dyer. I live at 4180 Doradale Hills in Mount Tabor. That's in Montgomery County. I sent each of you some comments about this MOA, and I wanted to so I won't deal with the first paragraph, you've already done with that. But DEQ is not proposing any kind of a cooperative understanding. They want us to understand that they are in charge. We have nothing to say about it on our lands. Do you believe that? That's what I read. In his presentation, they are limiting our county's ability to protect its staff and concerned citizens. I see no need for this MOA. I'll address it later. I recommend the board's action to be no action, or at the very most delaying acceptance of this MOA. My next paragraph. DEQ is setting itself to limit any independent observation or inspection from this county's staff or its concerned citizens, the way I read it. The very staff, who along with our citizens, will likely be eyeballing and on the scene more so than DOQ, even though it has 7 regional offices around. I doubt they're going to pull all that staff to this area for this purpose. In my estimation, DEQ, rather than having the staff to do all of the inspection it should do, is going to take an eyeballing situation in which they look at specific sites almost in a lottery way based on information MVP has given them about what they're going to do with our water in our crossings. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. These companies need very close scrutiny. They are on a highball run, way, way behind production now. DOQ needs all the help they can get, but it looks to me like they're asking us not to help them. DEQ needs all this help because the organizations that are going to build this pipeline have already been sentenced in 2 states for polluting after they had done their so-called plan, and they had to pay stiff fines for that. If this board believes an MOA with DEQ is necessary, then engage DEQ staff with our own county staff and in preparation of a working document in which we understand that DEQ is ultimately responsible. But we also understand that we have resources they need, and they should ask to be able to use those and work with us. Amen to that? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers who would like to come forward? Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Roberta Bonder, and I'm humbled to come behind Del Dyer. How do you follow that act? I'm from Bent Mountain, 11577 Bottom Creek Road. I'll be real brief. I would ask you folks to certainly highly regard the comments of your citizens. I really appreciate all that have been made tonight. And ask you further to consider that other counties, to my understanding, along the MVP, have not signed. Several have considered. I'm aware that Roanoke County is considered as of last week and has tabled the information for further review. Among those considerations are who's required to pay the costs associated with independent inspection and oversight. We need some clarification as to when the memorandum of agreement ends and who determines it. You've heard concerns about who actually will be the specified person to do the supervision. Do you have that staffing here now? And certainly, shouldn't it be someone who's local, who has experience and knows the topography and the geography of this place? Roanoke County, I know among other localities, has researched the issue of bond. DEQ has said that they don't believe they're capable of issuing a bond. The DEQ law, erosion, sedimentation, and other provisions allow for bonding, and bonding could potentially be contemplated in this scenario. There is good authority for it from other jurisdictions across the United States. There are laws, again, with regard to strict protections for forests that we would ask you to look at. And finally, in the context of independent oversight, we would ask you, most significantly, to consider the involvement of landowners and how do they play in to supervision and complaints with regard to what will still be private property on easement roads. On private roads, you'll have an easement that's forced on a landowner in eminent domain between a private landowner and a private company. And we're going to ask you to take time and contemplate the effect of that and the involvement of perhaps the locality or perhaps the state. So with that, again, other counties have tabled this resolution and allowed DEQ to do their work. We believe that they're capable of good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other individuals who wish to come forward? Seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and close. Oh, okay.
My name is Chris Roberts. I live at 1951 Mount Tabor Road in Blacksburg. I don't really have any further details to add to what's been said here tonight, but I just can't understand why you would push this through or agree to this, when there could still be more time to get information and get, more information from DEQ and from everyone involved, citizens included. So I would suggest or ask you to table the rest of the MOA for the time being.
Thank you. With that being said, is there any other individuals who would like to come forward?
Roy Christiansburg, 1025 Madison Lane. What I would like to ask the Board of Supervisors to look into is the spill prevention and countermeasure plans that Mountain Valley has. As of last week, they've been asked to give the spill prevention or SPCC plans. And basically what I saw come through FERC last week was just a basic generic form with no information. It did refer back to all the regulations in the Federal Register, but a spill prevention plan has to have emergency numbers, hospital numbers, sheriff's department, emergency coordinators, first aid, rescue, and in order for it to be a good plan, they're going to have a plan for each county the way I see it, because each county has a different hospital, has different emergency coordinators, has different chemical coordinators, and all these people have to be notified if there is spills. And the only information I really saw on their plan was we will provide those numbers and names and information before construction starts. But when I was in industry, I did SPCC plans for a company. We couldn't get any permits approved, anything without good plans. And for somebody to just send in a generic form, it's not right. All I'm asking is DEQ treat companies like they treated me for years. And they did their job then, but what I'm seeing so far, they're not doing much of a job. That's all I've got to say. Just treat everybody fair.
Thank you. Is there any other individuals? It looks like I'm seeing someone move forward. Okay, no, okay, she's already spoken. All right, seeing no one else coming forward, I'll go ahead and close public address. In regards to addendum, there is no addendum that I'm aware of. Is anybody aware of? I know there was a slight modification of the agreement, but that wasn't put in as an addendum. So next is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Is there a motion to go into work session?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Yes, please,
Aye.
thank you.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
We're in work session. The first item on our agenda is relocation of voting precinct D1.
Marty, do you want to take that, or, well, here, Connie's coming up, so, great. Sorry, Connie, I didn't see you coming.
That's quite all right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm Connie Vire. I'm the General Registrar for Montgomery County now. I'm here tonight to talk to you about why we need to relocate Precinct D1, Christiansburg Armory. We were notified in late March by an email from Randy Wingfield, then the Assistant Town Manager for Christiansburg, that the town of Christiansburg and the Army ceased with their agreement that they share that facility. We have looked at several locations. Out of the locations that we've looked at, the board and I visited 2 of those, the Masonic Lodge and the Victory Restoration Church. Out of those two areas, the board voted that the Victory Restoration Church out on Mud Pike would be the best location for the new precinct.
I don't know if there's someone that's in your district. And do you have any questions you'd like to ask? I'll start off with you.
No, but I'm glad you moved it to the same district. I was looking at high school and...
It's a lot closer.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I know I went out of order a little bit. Ms. Perkins, do you have any questions?
No, I certainly don't.
Supervisor Creed?
I got it.
Shepherd? Motts? Ms. Biggs? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the VDOT Revenue Sharing Program.
And I believe Emily's going to update us on that.
Good evening. I'm going to give a modified version of what we normally do for revenue sharing because the state changed the rules a little bit this year. So I'm going to walk you through that and basically just kind of let that sink in and talk about what you may want to see while this application window is open. We can look at things a little bit differently. So, not my usual presentation. I don't have a bunch of roads to show you right now. Basically, NVDOT did provide a nice table spreadsheet set up to show the differences, but I wanted to highlight the 3 main changes that impact us the most. Previously, there was a $10 million per locality each year. That was your project limit. But there was an unlimited project allocation, meaning that if you had a $50 million project, you could just apply for 10 for 5 years to fund it. And then the surplus funds, this is sort of interesting and it encompasses a few lines, were transferred administratively. And what VDOT would do is, as they would finish up a project, which is very common for us, especially on our VDOT administered projects, I think Blue Springs came in under budget, but one of the other roads was going over, and so they would contact us and say, do you want us just to take these funds and move them there? We'd talk about it, and usually it was a really good fit. And so we worked with VDOT closely on that. With the new policy update, there's $5 million per locality each year, and there's a $10 million cap per project. So you cannot get the revenue sharing match on any project over $10 million. And surplus funds have a whole set of parameters, and I'd be glad to share them with you, but it's a lot of detail. And can only be transferred, so VDOT says they have surplus, they consult with us, but ultimately our CTB member has to sign off on it before they can be moved between projects. This will result in more revenue sharing funds going back into the pot is what this will mean. And you'll notice here under new policy, I did this little indentation here. So we're now in a 2-year cycle. The window that's open now, I think that's my next slide, is for FY19 and FY20. And so it is $5 million per year, but it's $10 million per cycle. There's a new web-based portal to submit applications. I will say that's very helpful for staff because it starts lining up with the other ways that we do applications with VDOT. And those funds will be made available if you get the funding in July 1 of 18 and July 1 of 19, which is how it typically works. We're just grouping 2 years together now. So this current application cycle for the 2 years opened on August the 1st, and the deadline to request projects is November the 1st. So we just thought we would bring you guys up to date, talk to you about this a little bit, and give us a little time to get those applications and resolutions passed. One of the things that's important to note is in FY 2018, the statewide pot was about $100 million. In Montgomery County, we received $100,000 for Price's Fork. You'll know that last year I came to you and told you that that project needed additional funds for relocating utilities. And Western Perimeter Road was ultimately, we are a pass-through on that for the university. So you can see there that we received $9,800,000. We received almost 10% of the statewide funding last year.
Good job.
These two projects only received funding because they were already Tier 1. As part of the scoring process, roads are either Tier 1, 2, 3, and there's even a 4, but if we were a 4, we probably wouldn't even submit. But only Tier 1s received any funding last year, statewide. And again, we got 10%, so maybe that's why they changed the rules on us. There's only going to be approximately $100 million statewide for the next 2 fiscal years. And that's mainly because the state is really looking at funding transportation differently now. There's a big focus on smart scale. And they're also just trying to deal with some of the state of good repair issues. So there's different pots of money, and revenue sharing for some reason is a pot that just keeps getting smaller. Historically, Montgomery County, we've had requests around $500,000, and we've sort of taken a handful of road projects and put them together. Last year, in addition to the 2 that received funding, we had some Tier 2 projects, Union Valley, Pike Lane, and Pine Hollow. Union Valley is actually a drainage specific project. It has some other elements to it, but it's really to address some stormwater issues out there. And then Pike Lane and Pine Hollow were both mostly paving. You can see there that we didn't ask for that much funding on those, but they were not funded. So certainly we can brush those applications off and push them forward, but that would only put us around $200,000. And if we're looking at over 2 years, what you typically set aside, as we mentioned, is more than that. I will sort of put a pin in for Price's Fork. Dan Brew is our project manager on that, and he's doing a great job keeping it moving forward. And we're actually going to talk about that for the next item. But we've had some really positive changes, one of which is a big line of sight improvement out at Brooksfield. You're going to be able to actually see when you make the left, which is going to be pretty different. But as part of that, they've had to cut a bank and build a wall, and that wall needs a fence. And so we're a little bit more than what we want, and he's going to run some numbers just to let us know if we're still within our budget on that. That would be a Tier 1 if we did need a small amount of funding. Other than that, those are the only things we sort of have in the queue. One of the things we can do is continue to work with VDOT and talk to you guys about road projects that you know of that we could add to our list and work on applications for. Another thing that we can do is kind of bring back a variety of options for you guys. I mentioned Smart Scale earlier. We had 3 applications, brought them all to you. We talked about how we wanted to rank them. And they did not score well in the last round, and we're working on some things that we think will help them score better. One of the things that helps them score better is if you have funding that you're putting on them. So we can certainly bring forward, a hybrid where we talk about some revenue sharing projects, but maybe we take some of the transportation money that we have and we look at getting a bigger bang for our buck on that cost improvements for smart scale. We cannot, I did ask if we could put in for revenue sharing and then apply that to smart scale, but the timeframes are off. They want you to construct revenue sharing in a very short amount of time, and they smart scale funds, if you were to get them, it's still 6 years out before you're actually spending them. So the cycles don't exactly line up, but I asked. So that's basically all that staff wanted to share with you, just to let you know that revenue sharing looks a little different this year. And we have quite a few options that staff's glad to bring forward. We just didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves before we kind of gave you this update.
Start with Supervisor Shepherd. Do you have any questions?
I don't.
Supervisor DeMotts?
I do. Back to your first slide or second slide. Who is our CTB representative? It's Fralin, or is he done?
So it still says his name on the website, but I felt like his term was over. I just couldn't find any new information.
I think they serve until their appointments.
Okay.
I think that's right.
That would
so
make
it's,
sense.
I think William Fralin and Court Rosen
is
at large.
So so William Fralin is serving until his appointment is named?
I think that's correct.
Will he be serving until they find an appointment, or will it just be they found him and now they need to name him or her?
I don't know.
Could you find out?
I will.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Second question. So it looks like now, before we could apply for $10 million per year, now we can apply for $10 million every 2 years. So it's half of the funding that we have access to. And then I know you probably don't know by memory, but what makes a tier 1, tier 2? What kind of factors influence
There's different
that?
parameters. For tier 1, one of the things is it's already an active project, which is how our other 2 projects were tier 1s last year. But it also has to do with how they've been prioritized by the locality. Are they in your county's CIP, your capital improvement plan? Have they been identified in some way? For each tier, there's sort of a list of things that talk about how they're prioritized. And tier 1 is a difficult tier to achieve. It's not consistently when we have done applications, and I've only gone back to the year before I started, we've typically submitted a tier 2 type of project. So a project that is of importance to a locality, but not necessarily, called out in a plan, or of the highest importance, maybe statewide. We typically focus on our secondary roads.
So with the smart scale, I know some of their determinations were economic impact, safety. Does that type of stuff factor into the tiers, or is that a totally different scoring system?
It is a different scoring system.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs?
I don't have any questions, but I think it's interesting that the state is always shrinking the pot. Only comment.
Supervisor King?
No questions.
Supervisor Perkins?
No questions, but I did tell Ms. Biggs.
Supervisor Creed? Emily, thank you very much.
So you'll see us at least one more time on revenue sharing. And I have a very brief update for Price's Fork Road.
Yes, thank you. I was getting ready to say the next thing up is Price's Fork Road project, which
we just looked at the agenda and had those few easements that we've been acquiring, and thought we'd give you a quick update to let you know what was going on with this project. If you're not familiar with the project area, we're basically doing 3 left turn lanes. This is Brooksfield. This is the old elementary school. This is where the lane will be, and then this is Thomas Lane. So those 3 left turn lanes within the existing right-of-way there will help quite a bit with our commuter traffic that we have out there. And This was basically, before I came here, determined to be a county priority. I think there was a hard look taken at some of the volume, some of the crashes that we've seen out there, lots of rear-end crashes. And so as a board, you committed to $1 million in funding for an estimated $2 million project. I did give you these numbers just to let you know kind of where we are right now. I mentioned earlier that we might need a little more funding, but we're still coming in under that. And this actual number doesn't include that there is a small portion provided by the developer of the old elementary school site that will also factor in. So we're still under what we thought the estimate would be. Some of that has to do with the old rules and being able to move money off of old projects. So that won't be something we can look for in the future. But that sort of gives you an idea of, this was a pretty big initiative. As I mentioned, the county typically does $500,000 annually. And in 2015, the county decided to do 2 years worth of allocations for crisis work. So this project has been moving right ahead. Phase 1, the preliminary design work, we brought in an on-call consultant because this is a locally administered project. They've been working for us doing the surveys. We had our citizens meeting out at the Grange, and we had a 50% plan. And we are very pleased that since that 50% plan, we got a lot of good input and heard from a lot of citizens and a lot of stakeholders there who made some really good suggestions related to stormwater placement, how there could be less impacted driveways through there. And it also is how we improved the line of sight of Brooksfield and some other things. So the project is much stronger now as we're in phase 2. We're currently in the right-of-way acquisition, so that's why you're seeing those easements for construction that you're being asked to look at this evening. Of the 6 that we need, 4 are already ready. And in consultation with Marty and Dan, the other 2 are just forthcoming. They're moving right along. So that's very positive that we're getting ready to leave the right-of-way phase. And we're also at what we call 90% plan submission, which is a pretty big deal. When I talked to Dan today, he said pretty much any day we could get those plans submitted to VDOT. 90% means that you're basically ready. You're even putting together your bid documents and things. So it's a pretty positive step for us to be still on schedule. We didn't exactly hit every month that we had hoped to hit in the exact order we'd hoped to hit, but the project is moving forward, and we're really excited that construction is going to start out there, and we're going to have some improved safety. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Did that spark additional
Yeah.
questions?
You mentioned twice about, like in the past where we've moved, money from one project to another, and you mentioned that, now there are going to be strict parameters. So again, like it's taking away localities' flexibility to do the best job that they know because they know what, the area and what they need to do. Here's my question. So let's say we have some money left over on a project and we want to put it somewhere else. What happens if they don't let us?
So our money is always our money. So that is not something that they take from us. But if we had part of the match left, and let's say the construction came in under, and we had another project, so part of the parameter is you have to have another project that's also in the same timing. So you can't wait for construction in future years. It would need to be pretty much ready to go. The likelihood of that happening is pretty positive. I've talked to VDOT about it, and they feel like we don't really know what would happen since these are new rules. But we do feel like the likelihood of the locality and the local VDOT office working together, that we would be able to do that, and that would keep the other project moving forward. But it's uncertain right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Did that spark any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have one. You didn't mention the grant money, and am I wrong? Did I misunderstand the grant for that project? The school, didn't part of it go toward the road?
No, actually, part of the match that they used is the match of the portion of revenue sharing that the county is doing. So there were no actual funds that went into the road, but they did use the portion that affects that project as part of their match in the VCI grant.
Okay, I was confused.
It's like a credit. Credit.
Credit. Martin says it's credit.
No, we're getting credit.
Oh, yes, we received credit.
Yeah, what I'm saying, we put the money for the road project is being credited toward that grant project as money
Part of
being
our
put
match
into that
money.
project,
Right.
yes. So, does that make sense? Instead of having to pay extra money, they're counting that money as part of that project.
Okay.
But
And it does go towards other types of infrastructure, but
not for the road work.
Do you have questions?
Yeah. Didn't the owner supposed to put some kind of money into the road too?
Yes, the owner is putting 100,000 forward at 2 separate time periods.
Yep, once the construction starts.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next on our agenda for a work session is Memorandum of Agreement with the Department of Environmental Quality.
And Mr. Chair, this is back on the agenda, as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. There was some concern after the last meeting with the way it was, this information had been shared with the public. And also, I know there had been some concerns raised by citizens that the board wanted an opportunity to discuss this evening. So that's the purpose of this work session item.
So I think, I guess I'll speak first. I think we should definitely, at the minimum, table it.
Yeah.
If not, remove it from consideration. We need to at least table it. We've gotten new information tonight. I think we'll continue to get new information as other counties are discussing it. And the deadline for signing is October 22nd.
No, that's the comments.
The comments. So we have to have our comments in place by the 22nd. And Roanoke is meeting on the 10th, if I remember correctly. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Roanoke County is meeting to vote on theirs on October the 10th. So we could wait until after they vote, which would put us at the roughly the 14 days after the 9th is the 23rd.
Which is
so
after.
we that's a day after the, if we want to wait to see how they do and be able to look to see if they've altered their agreement substantially.
Well, I think we should consider Roanoke and the other surrounding counties that are receiving the similar MOA. And the reason that I have this opinion, and I'm not sure, I hope all of you kind of are able to say where you stand as well. You've all heard me thank the members of our audience and others in our community multiple times for continuing to dedicate countless hours to the fight against MVP. And I think we have to listen. I did vote for us to move forward with this at our last meeting. I regret that. And I think the citizens have spoken. They've asked us to table this, and so we should at least table it for consideration down the road. We've shown ourselves to be very responsive to the citizens, especially on this issue, and I think we should continue that.
Supervisor Biggs, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, I think there needs to be in our looking at it some real clarification on, what a locality is allowed to do and what DEQ does. And I think maybe some of the history of it, it's my understanding that this memo of agreement was sent out in the same form to all the localities. And it's also my understanding that there has been a communication from DEQ saying that they will not have any changes to the memo of agreement. And so with those parameters in mind, I think that when we are having a discussion, we really need to be aware of what we can and cannot do. And I also am, am for tabling this. I've talked to some folks. Also, the emails. I don't even know if I got to answer all my emails, but I read them all, and I think there's just a lot of things floating out there that we need to clarify, not only for ourselves as a local governing body, but also for our citizens. And so, I don't know about how to. I would assume that whatever was written by DEQ saying that they would not take any changes to it, can that be made public document?
Was that an email or a phone conversation?
It was an email.
If it's in writing?
Okay. I
I
don't think
mean,
it's no problem.
Okay.
Is there,
I agree.
I'm in an email, yes, Mr. Creed.
I just got one more thing. I want everybody to keep this in mind. I just wrote a really pretty thing down here. It says DEQ is the biggest liar I've ever met. And that's exactly what I think about it. And whether we stop now or whether we stop a week from now, I don't think that's relevant. We can do whatever the board wants to do, but keep in mind, the snake you're biting, that's biting you, could just reach around there and do that, and you'll get out of everything. So keep it in mind.
Any other comments?
Nope.
I just
agree
got
with
one thing. We asked our attorney to look over this agreement, and I think he recommended we signed it. Is that correct? I mean, it covers our bases. It covers if something happens 2 or 3 weeks down the road and we decide that it's not good for us, we can get out of it.
Yeah, you
Is
can
that
always
correct?
get out of it, Right.
I mean, I have a lot of... Everybody says, let's wait on Roanoke. We was the first locality that come out against this pipeline. I do want to work with our localities around us. Roanoke, Giles, everybody. We like to work together. But we have to look and see what's best for Montgomery County as a whole. And we look for our attorney, and if he thinks this is a good thing, I mean, I have no problem with putting it off. But I just want people to understand how much time he has put into this. He's put a lot of time into it.
Right.
I'd sent out an email to my fellow supervisors, especially was there any other comments? I didn't mean to cut anybody off. Asking for their input because the pipeline doesn't run through my district. This is not something I get a lot of emails on. In looking at this and trying to look at what's going on in West Virginia and North Carolina, I look at really DEQ as being the last line of defense. And that's just my thoughts. And one of the reasons I was in favor of the memorandum of agreement is I'm hoping that we can convince DEQ to be on our side, to look out for our citizens, to try to work with them, to have Scott ride along with them, to talk about some of the importance of Montgomery County. Now that may not be the right perspective. I understand that. There may be that perhaps DEQ is just using this as publicity to show that they're cooperating or allowing the localities to comment. But in that email I said I would listen to what my fellow board members said, and I meant that. And but I also want to make sure everybody understands the timetables. If we're waiting for everybody else, that means that we won't be following the comments. We won't be complying with this agreement.
Well, is that true? Can't we file comments if we haven't passed the MOA? I thought we could still file comments.
I mean, you can file.
Yeah, that doesn't preclude you from...
Yeah.
It doesn't prevent you, but at this point in time, we would be working with DEQ to file those comments as part of this agreement memorandum of understanding. Now, at the same time, we have incredibly limited resources. We do not have the staff to be able to comment. We are not designed for this. That is not our role. It's DEQ's role. So, you know, we're looking at this situation, but I'm going to vote. It appears that the supervisors whose district this runs in, who's adjoining it, are going to ask to table it, and I'm going to vote with them. But I do have some concerns about how far we put it off, and the fact that if DEQ is the last chance, then we've kind of just said, by the way, this agreement that you voluntarily were going to enter into, we're not going to sign it.
Well, I have a
and that has
question.
ramifications when you say no to somebody. Sometimes that is not always the best way to try to get them on your side.
But are you saying that our intent was to pass the MOA and send the comments with it? I thought the comments were separate from the MOA.
I think that, in my mind, that they were one part and parcel. I mean, we do not have the staff to really file the comments. We don't, and I don't think anybody's under that illusion that we've got that kind of staff. At least I haven't seen anything from any of our staff saying, yeah, no problem, we can make blanket comments. But if we don't want to enter into the memorandum of agreement, if that's going to be our policy, I'm willing to listen. I just have some reservations about if we want DEQ to be on our side, is this the best way to go about it? And so I've said my piece. I'm going to vote with y'all. But those are my concerns. Yes, Ms. Mons.
There's just a couple of little things that I wanted to add in addition to what you're saying. Our speakers tonight, and my own handwriting is somewhat terrible, so I'm kind of reading this chicken scratch. There were a couple of people that commented about this possibility, the possibility of this being blame sharing, or it could create some sort of avenue down the road for blame sharing, and I put a question mark next to the word litigation. So that would be something that I would want a little bit more information on. And then I made a note here, a speaker made a point that I thought was quite appropriate, and that's why I'm bringing it back up, that we don't have the staff, as you said, and if we were to create staff to do it, we would be creating that at taxpayer expense, which I don't think is what our citizens would want us to do, to create additional staff for this level of monitoring at additional taxpayer expense. So there's a couple of additional concerns that I have.
What about bonding?
I mean, I think we can ask him. If you remember, when one of the things I asked MVP was, hey, will you post a bond for people whose wells might be affected? I haven't seen them volunteer to do that, and I don't expect MVP to volunteer to do that, and I don't expect, and from the comments that were made, I don't expect DEQ to require them to be bonded.
So I guess my question is, so if the water quality is impacted in a negative way, then, you know, our roads are torn apart. Is the county supposed to come behind and fix all that?
That's a question to you. Is that our expectations? And you know the role of government. We don't repair the roads. That's VDOT's role. That's something that they've got to fix. We don't repair folks' wells that are not on our PSA. So you know the answers to that question. This is, so far I've not heard anybody on this board say this pipeline is a good thing. But it's not a choice that we've made. You know, we've had folks that said all we had to do was pass a zoning ordinance and it was going to disappear in one of our first meetings, and obviously that wasn't the case. And this is on a federal level. We have an administration in the presidency who wants it. We have governors who want it. As Mr. King pointed out, he watched the debates carefully and sent out an email and said, hey, did you watch the debates? Both of the candidates were in favor of the pipelines being built. So I don't expect there to be a radical change in regards to that. One of the reasons I said we ought to have bonds is because I'm concerned that individual citizens will not have the abilities to go into federal court and sue to get their water restored and be able to prove they'll spend $30,000 in legal fees to get a $10,000 well. So those are all legitimate concerns, but the county won't be doing that. That's not our role, and it's not our fault. We are not asking for this pipeline to be built.
May I answer your question with regard to Roanoke County, sir? You asked about other counties.
I don't have a problem as far as having work session, but normally this is our time for us to talk and work through that process. Do board members want, if someone wants to hear from her, I'm happy to have her address the board, but I
really don't think at this time we should cut anybody off that wants to speak for just a minute or so. And
Yeah.
I don't object.
Okay. Ms. Bond?
I think it's good.
Chairman Tuck, Roanoke County actually is scheduled for an advisory committee meeting, at which this will be a serious and extensive conversation. There have been 4 or 5 members of the Pipeline Advisory Committee who've been researching and will provide input at our PAC meeting a week from today, October 2nd, and then October 10th. It is scheduled technically to be on the calendar, and again, the opportunity will be for this matter to be tabled, as Nelson County did. Nelson County dealt fairly simply with it, as I understand from citizens there, and they have tabled it absolutely until DEQ makes its permitting decision, is how confident they were that it is the work of DEQ to analyze and provide, analyze information that MVP, some of which is still not provided. You had questions with regard to comments. And I certainly respect Attorney McMahon's information to you. So I would ask, though, with these questions about bonding that are existent in other infrastructure projects from Minnesota to North Carolina and other counties, that those are questions that you folks need to answer. Potentially unprecedented water emergencies for your communities in this county that have not been answered. And with the level of questions that you folks have, we implore you folks to take even a couple weeks until your next meeting to consider the answers to these questions. You have...
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
what
sir.
code section allows us to require them to have a bond?
There are, I'll get back
Montgomery
to
County.
I'll be glad to get back to you on that. And I want to add, as to another question, I'll get back to you with bonding, but there are sections that I have read, and I wish I could cite them to you, Chairman Tuck, but I will give them to you, that contemplate in similar context where bonding is allowed. There's also a provision in Section 62 that allows DEQ to require even more.
No, but for Montgomery County to require them to do a bond? Is that...
Oh, excuse me. And so what we were talking about, what you're contemplating, and Craig County, in fact, is conversing on right now, is the distinction between the fact that you might not have money, but the fact that you have power. And should you cede your power to a DEQ that is being strong-armed by a governor that's being strong-armed by the gas industry? We'd ask you not to do that and to table this resolution for now. You might revisit it after you have additional information from a group of citizens who can provide you with information for your comments, if they haven't done so already. So I'd ask you to engage with your citizens as you inform yourselves on your decision-making here. You have informed citizens like no other in this project, and what a gift. Thank you.
And Chair Tuck, what about
No, excuse me, Ms. Biggs is speaking. Hold on one
the
second.
spill thing that the gentleman brought up, like we have to have the spill prevention?
That's DEQ
That's a
again.
requirement.
Okay,
We
and so we
get-
could just give them the
It's not we
contact.
give them.
No, the contact
Okay.
information that they were talking about.
And,
Okay,
and
gotcha.
that's why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
And there's been speakers in the past that said that we had that authority. That's why I was specifically saying, if there's a code section that says that we can require them to have a bond, we're going to pull that code section up. We're going to utilize it. But that's why I was asking the speaker, tell me what, and I guess tell me what the facts are. Tell me what I really can do. Tell me how I can get that authority. And that's what I'm looking for. Because if we don't have that authority and it's all in DEQ's hands, which that is what it appears to be, that's where some of my concerns are. Now, DEQ may not do a good job, and maybe we just don't want to be a part of it. We want to take a step back and say, that's their problem, we weren't involved with it. And that may be the approach this board wants to do. But that's why I asked this very specific questions. Tell me where the authority comes from. So,
Marty.
I don't Marty, do we have the authority to require them to have a bond?
I'm not aware of it. I mean, let me just say what the MOA, what we talked about last time was, and I'm not saying you shouldn't table it. I'm not saying that at all. It's up to you. It's legislative discretion how you want to do it. The MOA is not going to change. DEQ's told us they're not going to change. Now, the citizens have brought up reasonable changes, but DEQ's not going to listen to any of those. And some of those changes, though, may be even in conflict with state law. Remember, DEQ is statutorily in charge of doing E&S and stormwater management for this project. The code's clear. We have no say in it. I mean, we can provide comments like citizens can provide comments. However, we have no administrative or enforcement powers for this, period. This agreement doesn't give us any of those powers. Now, you could read the agreement to say, well, maybe they're setting us up or something. I don't know. I'm trying not to be thinking there's some type of backward or some type of ulterior motive with this thing. Basically, what they're saying is that they're providing contact information between us and them. They're saying you can go on inspections if it's feasible, and we'll receive comments until the 21st or 22nd of October. Period. That's it. I mean, we're not ceding any authority. We don't have authority. I mean, that's all. But if you don't want to sign it, that's fine. I think you have that. Absolutely.
Well, are we not allowed to go on inspections otherwise or inspect otherwise?
No, I don't think they're going to take you on inspections otherwise. Make it clear, we're not inspecting.
Right, we're just along for the ride.
We're just looking.
Now, we can provide comments without signing this MOA, I think. I mean, we can send them comments, I mean, I think we have a right to do that. And they have a right to ignore them or I mean, that's up to them, right? And also, we will work with our citizens, I am positive, as being a liaison with DEQ on any complaints we're going to get as this thing goes forward. I mean, we're going to do the best we can. Do we have a lot of staff? No. But we're going to do the best we can. So, I mean, we can sign it or not sign it. It's up to you guys. It really is.
Okay. If we don't sign it, I was going to say, if we don't sign it, say it again.
If you don't sign it, then, I mean, we can still provide comments. We're not going to be able to go on inspections, most likely. But we're going to be able to still communicate with them, I would think, as a liaison with our citizens. So, a citizen on Mount Tabor calls and says, there's brown water going through, I think there's runoff. Can you talk with DEQ? Then we would do the appropriate thing and get with DEQ as quickly as possible and ask for them to go and look and see what the problem is.
Then they can refuse?
Well, we can't make them do it now, but we can encourage them and hope that they will do it and enforce the law, right?
So what are you saying? We should go ahead and sign the agreement?
He's saying it's our decision. This is why we were elected.
Right.
If you want to table and get more information or see what other localities are doing, because we're trying to work with them, that's up to you guys.
Supervisor Mons.
So, question for you, Marty, and this goes to the ulterior motive point. If we were to accompany, if a member of our staff was to accompany DEQ on an inspection and something is missed on the inspection, something is failing on the inspection, something is wrong, and DEQ doesn't catch it and our inspector doesn't catch it, have we then created a liability for the county as well?
No, we haven't. No, we could be criticized. Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but not a liability.
And then just more generally, I think in light of this discussion amongst ourselves and also I think clearly we can see that the citizens are eager to provide more input. Right. I think tabling it and discussing it and collecting more input is probably the best
we can put it off until
I think how the inspections would work, and Scott hopefully agrees with me, is that he wouldn't be going on like inspections. I think they'd be more going on inspecting problems kind of thing. Where we've got a complaint and they're going to go out and look at it. We might go out there as well so that we can hopefully provide feedback to our citizens on what we're seeing.
But a landowner could invite us.
Standard inspections that are based on a complaint basis, I don't think. I I mean, we don't have manpower to do that. That's DEQ's job, but I could see us going on inspections where there's a problem because we're trying to keep our citizens informed of how that's going to get solved. I could see that. Does that make a difference in what you're thinking?
But a landowner could also invite us to go on the, DEQ could make an inspection, a landowner could invite us to come make an inspection as well.
We can't make an inspection.
We can't make an inspection, but they can invite us to observe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we can't inspect. We don't have the authority to inspect. Like we could say, MVP, you're doing this wrong, and they could say, well, you can't tell us. It's DEQ's call, not your call.
All right. May I ask a question?
Sure.
So, if we tabled it to the next meeting,
The next meeting, Roanoke may have met,
right?
and from what I'm hearing from others, we're wanting to hear other localities, so it would be tabling it until late October.
Well,
The second
Or potentially not voting on it at all.
oh, you mean the second meeting, we said they're going to be, I thought you said DEQ wants it for the 20...
They want the comments
By the
by October 22nd,
22nd.
but the MOA doesn't have to.
It's actually 30 days after the
Yeah.
plan.
At 30 days after.
ENS is up, but Linda Major Sid Stormwater's not up, so.
So we have 30 days from the date that those plans even go up. That's when the clock starts. So there's no,
The 22nd was the 30-day mark.
so there's no real reason for us to sign this quickly
No.
if we know that a clock hasn't even started yet.
Well, that's
And
what I'm
other
trying
than
to
the
get
fact
to.
that they decide, hey, we're gonna do it now, and then maybe you run out of time over here a day early. They don't have to get back up and say, well, go ahead and tell us what you want.
Well, and we could still provide comments, even, I would think, after the date.
You could put it in written form, and maybe they take it home with them, but most likely they put it in the barrel, as I've seen them do.
Right.
I don't
So there's
trust them at all.
there's no real issue if we don't,
If you wait,
if we wait. That's what I'm talking
you can
about.
even table it to the 10th, see what you know then. If you don't know enough then, you can table it again to the next one.
Okay.
Option as well. It's just better to put either a date or some type of
All right,
trigger to
so
bring it back.
if I say I'd like to table it till the 10th
The 9th.
or the
No,
9th.
because it's a holiday.
Oh, the 9th, the
It's a
10th.
holiday.
Yeah.
It's the 10th.
Can I
correct my
say
calendar.
one thing, and this is
Yeah.
just from my perspective as board chair? I'd rather not the citizens be yo-yoed. They would know when they were going to come back.
Right.
If we know that Roanoke is not going to meet
So the 23rd.
until,
Maybe on the 10th.
but they do meet in the day.
Yeah, they meet at 2 or 3.
Yeah, so, I mean, we may be able to get that information back and digest it and act on it.
But
But,
didn't he say that we could table it again?
yes.
Yes.
But
Yeah, they
then
go
we're
back to the-
having a bunch of citizens come, they don't,
Keep coming back.
and come back, and
Right.
they may be happy about coming back. But
Well, I think
I'd
Ms.
like-
Majors will be here anyways.
But I'd like to be able to give them some guidance of, okay,
Right.
we're going to be putting this on the second meeting, the first meeting, but at the same time, we can make that adjustment, whatever. As I said in my email, I was acquiescing to the folks that this pipeline runs through in regards to this issue, and I was really listening to what you had to say. I expressed my concerns, and
Right.
Can we put it on the meeting for the 10th to at least hold a discussion about it at that point, and then
Put it on as a work session.
yeah, we could put it on as a work session, and then we could take action from work session if we're at the point where we're ready to take action. And then it could create a yo-yo where we're bringing y'all back again, but I think it's worth the investment of time. I hope it's worth the investment of time to do that.
And it,
I was just wondering, I keep hearing you say, wait till Roanoke makes a decision. Are we leaders or are we followers?
Well, I mean, I think more importantly to me is waiting on the ENS plans to come out and then starting that 30-day clock. I am interested to hear what Roanoke says, but that isn't the decision maker for me. There's other factors at play.
right.
because I still haven't heard that their board voted and said that they were in opposition to the
Right.
pipeline. And I do keep that in mind. And then if y'all will remember, legal counsel could not represent us because they considered a conflict of interest based on the resolutions we
Right.
passed. and versus the resolutions that they pass, because ours is a direct opposition instead of their resolutions.
So it is okay, it goes through my area more than anybody else's. So can we table it till the next time?
When we have to come out of the work session.
I know, but not while we're in work section. I'm saying, can we do it then?
Yeah.
And then, is that an agreement? We can agree while we're talking in work
It's
session.
in the old business, and at that point in time, I guess we would, when it came up under old business, there would be a motion to table it. And I assume there'll be a second. If I'm counting my votes right, there's at least 5 or 6 votes, maybe all 7, to table it at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, that's
So-
what I would like to, I think that's the appropriate thing to do, is
what
not
would
to
we-
make the decision at this point in time.
What would we be trying to do for the next 9 days or so, whatever the time is? What difference does it make whether we get it now or whether we get it then?
Well, the ENS plans, the erosion and sediment plans
Yes,
haven't
they're
been
there.
released yet, so that's stormwater, I apologize.
Stormwater, I'm
And
sorry.
erosion too, or sediment?
Those are out now, they just.
Just
Yeah.
stormwater then?
I think they've said pretty much that they're not gonna focus stormwater.
You what?
Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I got that off of the TV the other day,
That what?
that they were not,
And if it's
they didn't
not,
care about the stormwater. They said that we're gonna move this thing along.
I don't know if it's appropriate or inappropriate to ask, and I'm looking to Marty and Craig,
What?
but could Mr. Woodrum weigh in with his opinions some, or is that?
I don't know that he's prepared to discuss that because he's not been actively involved in the pipeline project.
I just think, I don't see any reason why we can't postpone it to the 10th. Unless every one of us agrees that we are or we aren't going to sign it.
Now, Marty, as a procedural, we did have that vote previously. Do we need to vote when we come out of work session to rescind that, the previous vote? Because, I was able to call each board member, and all 7 were in favor of putting it back on the agenda and not having me sign it.
Right.
Do we need to rescind that vote as a procedure?
Yeah, we could do that because the new MOA is a little bit different in that it's got the date.
Okay, the change of the date is 9 days difference?
Yeah.
Or- okay.
So you could rescind the previous action and table consideration of the new MOA until
Okay.
the 10th of
So
October.
that needs to be the motion when we go to
Yeah.
old
Yeah.
It
business?
could be a mutual,
Okay.
a motion could have both of those in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Next, unless there's more discussion, next on our agenda is legislative priorities, tab D.
Mr. Chair, under tab D are the legislative priorities as were identified by the board for 2017. So we put those in there as a point of reference. Also, at your place this evening, I have an email that Joe Fortier had sent relating to his project at the Old Price's Fork school. And as you're aware, one of the things they're working on there is a farm-to-table restaurant, and he's asked that in our priorities we support allowing a bill to move forward regarding liquor by the drink for that facility. And I know he's talked to Supervisor Shepherd. He's also talked to Delegate Rush. And I think Delegate Rush has indicated he'd be willing to carry the bill if the county votes in support of that. So that's one item that would be new on our agenda this year. I guess what we're looking for this evening is some general direction on what other items you would like to have considered under the priorities, or if you'd like us to take a shot at some of the ones from last year and bring that back for your consideration.
I'd be interested to hear what Supervisor Shepherd thinks
Right.
about this one in particular. And
I'm for it. I think it'll be a good thing in the long run. There's going to be some opposition, I'm sure, but
But it's only for that facility.
Yes.
It's not like it would extend
Correct.
outside the boundary of that facility, right?
Correct.
Well, the way it'll be similar to the one we did over at exit, was that
109. And then we did it at Roanoke also.
Yeah, so it'll have physical parameters that you'll actually have to pass a resolution voting on to send to our delegates. So you can limit just that structure if you want.
Well, with Supervisor Shepherd's support, I think that should be added to the priority list.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in opposition? So, what?
Yeah.
All right, so there's one no vote, but
And this one here, I fussed about it ever since I've been here.
about the cigarette tax?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a believer in sin taxes, Todd.
Well, maybe
You can tax
liquor.
they do, and I'm happy to,
I said Low County.
I have no problems with that, but
I think part of that issue too is that the inequality of taxation. There's not equal taxation between counties and cities and towns. And that's a perfect example of it. If you're in a city or town, you just do it. If you're in a county, you have to ask your father, who is the General Assembly. I guess it could be your mother too. I guess they're both down there, if it's okay for you to do. So part of that has to do with equal taxation authority.
That's the
That's been an
primary
ongoing
thing.
issue. Yes, it is.
That's the primary thing.
is there any other things that we would want to add?
Yeah, and I guess one thing, at least on this round, we're looking to see if there's anything new that you want added, because we can pretty much craft.
What's our timeline on that? When do we need to know?
We usually-
Tonight, or can we let you know in 2 weeks?
No, you can certainly think about it and let us know. We usually try to have something on the agenda in October to get to the VACO in November, and then to have a pre-assembly dinner with our legislators usually in December.
And try to send those to the legislators in October, because almost by December, they've gotten most of the stuff drafted.
So
Thanks for bringing that up, Chris, because I was thinking that sometimes we need to do it sooner.
yeah, we'd like to get, if you have any comments or thoughts, if you'll email me or Vicky or Marty and copy the rest of the board members, that gets that circulated, and then we'll have a draft. Hopefully, if we've heard some comments, we'll have a draft at the next meeting for you.
That's good.
Anything else? Is there a motion to come out of work session?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item on our agenda is the memorandum of agreement for DEQ. Is there a motion in regards to this?
Okay, what we're going to do, what the motion is, Marty, you can tell us how to say it in the correct language.
I think you're looking for a motion to rescind the
Right,
previous
to rescind the previous.
approval and then table the current version that's before you on the agenda till the October 10th meeting.
Okay, so it takes two motions that
Well,
we're talking
it's
about.
one
Just
motion.
one. I can put both those together? Okay, I'll put them together.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Tell me what it is she's...
All right, she's saying that we're tabling it till October the 10th, and that we're rescinding the previous vote where y'all authorized me to sign it. And that's, after that, I called all of y'all and you said, it's okay to hold off, don't sign it. And so then we're putting it on that agenda to review, and we can vote on it then in favor of it, or we can vote against it, or we can table it again. So that, Marty, did I correctly state that?
I think so.
You sure did.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, next item is new business. Resolution scheduling a public hearing regarding the proposed changing of polling places locations for the D1 precinct from Christiansburg Armory located at 15 College Street in the town of Christiansburg, county of Montgomery, Virginia, to the Victory Restoration Church located at 190 Bishopsgate Road, Northwest, in the town of Christiansburg, county of Montgomery, Virginia. Is there a motion?
Motion.
There was a motion.
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed? Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next is subject B, insurance settlement agreement with the release of all claims with Baycor, and this is in regards to the fire damage to the old Blacksburg High School. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject C, First Amendment to the Agreement for Purchase and Sale of Property between the county and H&S Development LLC, former Blacksburg High School property. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
So this amendment, are we voting now on the version that was on our agenda on Friday?
That,
I can discuss that. Let me just.
yes, can
Yeah.
We got a request from H&S Development to amend the agreement to do basically two things. One was to address the fire damage that occurred that you guys just approved the settlement with. They asked that would the county consider assigning those proceeds to them because they're as part of the purchase that we purchased in that building. And so the amendment is to address that. The board would agree that they'll assign the proceeds of the insurance, which is $70,000 and change, at closing if they close. And then the second request is that the current agreement does not address them being able to assign the rights of the agreement to another party. And so they specifically requested if we would agree to allow them to assign the rights to the town of Blacksburg. If the town of Blacksburg was willing, obviously, to purchase, it'd be up to them. So I drafted an amendment, sent over to them on Thursday. It's a pretty quick turnaround. We received comments back with changes today. We sent our comments back, and then we got a version that I provide you guys today. So it's different. The language is a little bit different than the one I sent out on Thursday and was put in the agenda. However, it's not substantively any different other than one thing. The amendment still provides that the board agrees that the proceeds can be assigned to them at closing. Agrees the town of Blacksburg can be assigned the rights under the contract, so long as they agree to the note and deed of trust. They can purchase it under the same provisions that H&S Development can. But then the third thing they added was that they went ahead and put in a closing date of November 22nd this year. That's to close, and that date's actually consistent with what's in the agreement now. The agreement now says that they'll close within 30 days of the deadline to elect to purchase, and elect to purchase would be 30 days before that November 22nd date. So what's before you is actually no different than what I sent out. It's just when lawyers get involved, they want to put their own language in, and I don't have any problem with the current language if you guys want to go ahead and proceed with approving it.
So my objection with the current language is assigning the insurance proceeds. I don't think that that's any issue. Opening the contract up so it can be assigned under the current terms, which I'm sure you all remember. When I gave my presentation, I called the current terms a sweetheart deal. So I, clearly think that the terms of the agreement are very favorable for the purchaser. So I have no problem with naming the town of Blacksburg as the entity that can have that contract assigned to them. My only reservation is those two items were on the agenda that was published on Thursday and was publicly available to citizens, and we didn't receive any input on either of those that I'm aware of. The closing date is in my opinion, a pretty sizable difference from what we gave to the public and what we would then be voting on tonight. So item number 1 and item number 2, I think, are easily something that I could be voting in favor of. It's now also adding in, and there's also a closing date. That gives me a little bit of pause, just because it hasn't had a public airing. And I don't know that the public would have any input in it, but in the interest of airing it publicly and being fully transparent, it's kind of a big deal to my district. If we are setting a closing date, that's really going to be a big deal in District G. So,
Can I ask this?
Well, it actually says no later than November 22nd, so.
If we, the current agreement says 30 days within basically October the 24th. If we left the November 24th, if we put it, well, no, it's November 23rd because there's 31 days in October. So if we left it, or if we put the language in that just said 30 days from October the 24th, would you be okay with that amendment?
if we could modify it to reflect under the terms of the purchase
contract,
agreement,
Okay.
that would be reasonable to me. I just am a little reluctant to have a set date without any time for the public to receive or digest that information.
I think that would be fine. I think.
That's a good compromise.
Yeah, I think that's
So
reasonable.
no later than 30 days after October the 24th.
According to the original purchase agreement. And I think that satisfies what their attorney wanted, what we as a board will probably expect and want. And then also, it makes it very clear that nothing untoward has happened. It references back to the original purchase agreement.
And I wrote that down. Now, I know that there was a motion and a second, and I forgot who made that. Is folks willing to accept that as a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Okay, so I heard, and Marty, is that acceptable to make that as a friendly amendment?
And I feel better about it too because, we didn't see the second one until we were here, and that's always, even though I trust Marty's opinion, that, but it helps, I think, with, this is what we studied.
Just
Yeah, we can
satisfies it.
modify it, but, it's our own. So yeah, I feel a lot better about it.
So there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion in regards to this?
No, I don't have any.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thank you.
And then the next item on our agenda is Subject D, Alliance for a Better Child Care Transfer from Contingencies at $13,335. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that because I asked to have it put back on.
And I believe Ms. DeMott
I'll
also.
second it 'cause I seconded
She
it.
specifically asked for it as well. So there's a motion and a second. Discussion. The only thing I wanted to make sure, and I had a conversation with Supervisor Shepherd, this is to allow them to continue to operate. This $13,000 would not be providing scholarships, as I understood.
Right.
And, but other than that, there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
I would just say that, in my travels this year across the state, that this has come up in a lot of localities as a problem, as an issue. That quality child care is not available. And the other issue that has come up is the certification aspect of it. So we're not alone.
Right.
Any further discussion?
Is this just for 1 year or is this 2 years?
No, this is 1 year, and we would need to refund it again if we were going to do this. And that was why I was asking about additional. No, Mr. Meadows has provided me. There was one behind the.
You had it hid, that's what.
I had it hid behind. And I was stealing his pen constantly.
I have to keep buying new pens.
Sorry about that.
The last one I got.
But, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
When they first come to us, they wanted it for 1 year. Said that's all they would need it. And that's the way it starts. And then they come back, and if I'm mistaken, please correct me. But she said some of this money would help pay her. Was that correct?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
she's the one out there doing all the work.
Right. Well, what are we gonna do next time when somebody else comes up and wants to start a business? They want us to pay their salary.
We just,
It's not a business. What they're trying to do is take the surrounding, like what we have now, and I think make it better, and also see if there's any way they can encourage other businesses to start up, and also address the problem of staff constantly leaving because they're not paid enough. And also to make the staff that is working within the facilities, whether it be a home facility or a day, whatever, to be certified and have access to that training.
And I'll say, I do see your point of it, the initial request being for a year only. And I'll just, Price, my son, started physical therapy for some problems that he was having with his ankles in May. And we were supposed to only be there for the summer. We got to the end of the summer and he'd made good progress, really good progress, but he's still in physical therapy now. And the point that I'm making is, I think we've made really good progress. She's actively recruited I think it was 2 additional child care centers to come into the area. We've set up a path for certification for child care workers, but she's not quite done yet. And so to continue to fund at what is, I think, a reasonable cost that's shared across multiple localities, to continue to do the work that she's demonstrated has already been very effective, to me is a reasonable allocation of funds.
well, I know,
Supervisor Perkins.
I think that we just make decisions based on each individual case. I mean, we're talking about one thing here, there may be another one, but it may not fit with what we've been wanting to have, even for this one. So I know there are precedents set, but at the same time, you have to look at each individual case as you go forward.
Is that the same amount that they took last year?
Yeah.
It is, but the town of Christiansburg is not contributing. When they made their presentation, they indicated, at least as I recall it, that's the reason I asked the question about is New River. New River did not give anything, I don't believe at all. And so now they're asking for 2 more years. Well, this year, they're just asking for this year, but when she was forthright, she said it's going to be 2 years, was where we were at. So
I think it'd be reasonable to expect in a year, if we were to give the funding today, to expect in a year a progress report. How have the funds of this agency been used, and what impact has that had on creating childcare availability in the New River Valley?
Which is the same thing, whatever comes before you. I know you have to look at precedents, particularly
and I just,
in a court.
And I said, when I voted for it last year, I would vote for it 1 year, but I would not vote for it in subsequent years, because we were told it was only going to be 1 year. And we have so many requests of so many good agencies that ask for money. And that's the hard, and that's where I'm at. We said we were going to do it 1 year, and in my mind, we're going to do it 1 year, and we did it 1 year. The town of Christiansburg said they would do it 1 year. They did it 1 year. Now, I think the town of Blacksburg is still contributing, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
And Virginia Tech is as well.
And Virginia Tech is giving a much larger amount.
Yes. And
Well, I think what we're talking about is childcare here. I mean,
Well,
that's the issue. It's childcare.
And there's a true economic impact as
Sure.
well. If people can't find quality childcare for their
They're not
children,
gonna come.
then they're not going to come here. And conversely, if they're already living here and they can't find quality childcare for their children, then it affects their own ability to provide for their families. And I'm not too far removed from having to play the ball game of searching for childcare. It's hard here. There's not a lot of options. And some of the options that are out there are unlicensed or in facilities that may not quite be up to, wouldn't have passed my checklist of what I wanted in a childcare for my little ones, so.
Well, I hate to tell you, but 53 years ago, when I was searching for childcare, there was only one, Mount Tabor, as a organized thing, and then the rest were in private homes with no supervision, no anything, you know. Well, they were supervised by the person, but I mean,
But no
nothing from
licensing.
out, no licensing. And so it was very difficult, and consequently, we suffered for a very long time with my husband in school, and me was not able to go back to work to find somebody that I agreed was really the person I wanted to take care of my child. That was 53 years ago, so.
Well, I want to just add that we're not talking about babysitting.
No, we're talking
Quality
about
child care is enabling, and this is what I think is a positive about it, is we get the scholarships going because a lot of the folks that can't afford the quality child care would be folks that would be involved in this. And I can tell you, as a preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher, third grade teacher, if you don't have quality child care before you get to kindergarten, you're already a year behind everyone else.
Absolutely.
And that continues on. So you either sort of invest in the front end of things, I've been preaching all my life, or you're going to invest in the back end of things, and that includes our investment even with our drug courts and, you know, and what Chris does all the time. You've got, that is such a critical age. And then to have a situation where if you have a child in public school and they can go to child care before or after school, and it's quality, it's not babysitting, it's not kids sitting, someone's going to be there to help with homework, or someone's going to be there to, you know, to supervise it. It makes a big difference in youngsters' lives. So I'm willing to give it another year. I feel very strongly about it.
Chris, I think we've made all the arguments we can. Can I call the question?
I was getting ready to say, is there any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
No.
Mr. Creed?
No.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No.
Ms. Biggs?
Yes.
Chair Tuck?
No.
I have 4 noes, 3 ayes.
So you don't want to give the $13,000?
Yes, ma'am, that's why I voted.
Boy, that's a big amount of money we got to.
You give me some of it, then.
And let's move on. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda.
That's all right.
In regards to, am I at subject E? Okay.
No, you're on E.
Deed of gift and donations of 2 variable width drainage easements from Prices Fork Village LLC, Prices Fork Road, turn lane construction. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Any motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye, I guess.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject F, deed of gift and donation of temporary construction easement variable with permanent drainage easement from Heather and Walker Pettis of Prices Fork Road turn lane construction project. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I would point out that this is a deed of gift. These citizens are giving to the county and to VDOT to make that road a little bit better place. And that's the reason I didn't place these on consent agenda, because I wanted to recognize the sacrifices that their family is making to be able to allow that road to expand and saving taxpayer money.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Good.
Motion second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Deed of gift and donation of 3 construction easements, permanent access easements, variable width permanent utility easements, and 2 permanent drainage easements from the Prices Fork Grange 786 Prices Fork Road turn lane construction project. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And again, this is the Grange making this gift.
That's good.
And there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And I lost my place with my
H.
Thank you. Request for VDOT to restrict through tractor trailers and semi-trailer combinations on Mount Tabor Road. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject I, Social Services FY 2018 Budget Reconciliation. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Social Services Supplemental Appropriation Additional Position. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject K, resolution establishing the personal property tax relief percentage for 2017.
Motion.
And thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject L, Community Planning Month Proclamation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And I see Emily smiling
She's
back
super
there.
excited about it.
Any further discussion?
I think it should be noted that the launch of the comp plan is going to begin in Community Planning Month at the Price's Fork Village. So those will, I expect balloons and banners and confetti and all of that.
No pressure. There was a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next up is County Attorney's Report. Next up, and I'm afraid, I look over here and there is a book that he's written.
I had to steal my pen back. 'Cause I was
County Administrator's Report.
I only have 6 items and they'll be fast.
Good gracious.
First off, if you haven't had a chance to go by the animal shelter recently, the former dog pound is no more.
Yay.
Yes.
Secondly, we had a great joint meeting, as has been mentioned previously, with the Planning Commission last Monday night, and I would encourage us to do more of those type joint meetings. I thought that was a great way to kick off the comprehensive plan project, and I want to give kudos to Emily again for all the work she did in getting that ready to go. Last week was meeting week. On Wednesday night, Chair Tuck and I attended the NRV passenger rail update over at Radford University, and it was covered in the media. $350,000 has been allocated to study the rail improvements that are needed between Roanoke and Christiansburg for that phase to move forward, so that was good news.
Good.
The challenge will be finding the many millions of dollars to address whatever they find as a part of that study, I'm sure, but our legislators were there and they supported it, so hopefully we can keep that moving forward. I also want to thank Supervisor DeMott and Supervisor King for attending the Water Authority annual dinner meeting Thursday night. That was a good event as well, and appreciate 2 of y'all attending. Next Monday, I will actually be at the Virginia Municipal League meeting, even though we're not municipal, we're VACO. As an officer in VLGMA, I have 2 events that day at VML, so I'll be at Williamsburg on Monday to see what the cities and counties are doing. And just lastly, a reminder that our next board meeting is not on a Monday night, it's on a Tuesday night, October 10th. That's it.
Wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought.
This list over here is my to-do list for tomorrow.
Okay, I was worried. The board members' reports. Supervisor Perkins.
I would like to thank you all. I'm not sure I did for the ice cream party that we had up in the meadow. I don't know if I thought I thanked you, but probably I did not. You see, I just come back from a class reunion, and I'm not going to tell you which one, but it's been quite a time when we're not going to have any more because there probably won't be any more of us alive by next time we get ready to have them, because it's been a long time. But I did travel there this weekend. It has nothing to do with the government center, but I did want to say that I do thank you very much for all that you did to have the meadow taken over by the town of Blacksburg, because I know they'll do a good job with it, and also to have it dedicated to me, and I feel very humble and I feel very fortunate to have served the citizens of Montgomery County for 20 years. So I thank you again, and I hope and I pray and I know that the people in Montgomery County will enjoy being there. It's a beautiful setting, it's a beautiful view, and it was just a very special thing. So thank you very much for all of that. I appreciate it.
Supervisor Biggs.
Just to sort of play on what Craig said, the demo of the old animal, I never called it a shelter, but I'll just say animal building. It was great last Friday, I guess Friday evening, September 15th, when we were there, just to see the first part of it come down was just so exciting. And the people that were there, the volunteers that were there, there's a lot of excitement going on. So I'm glad it's all the way down now. That's good news. The second thing is you all will be receiving an invitation for October 18th at 7:30 at the Christiansburg Library to meet the new library director. So the Board of Supervisors from Floyd County, our board, and all the town councils involved, Christiansburg, Blacksburg, and the town of Floyd, will all be invited. So hopefully you'll be able to attend. So expect your invitation.
That's the 18th?
Mm-hmm. It's on a Wednesday. And then Thursday, or Wednesday this week, I'm sorry, I don't know why I have Thursday on my mind. But anyway, Wednesday this week, in this room, doors will open at 6 o'clock, and from 6:30 to 8 p.m., there is going to be a legislative forum on disability issues, and it's to let your voice be heard. Specifically, it's going to be focused on issues of concern to people with disabilities, their families, service providers, and advocates. And it's going to be a listening opportunity for our policymakers to hear your stories, your positions, and your concerns. It will, at this event, there will be Delegate Joseph Yost, Delegate Nick Rush, candidates Chris Hurst, and Flo Kittner. So they will all be here that evening. So I wanted to I picked this up today when I was over at a meeting with the New River Valley Community Services Board.
What day is that? I'm sorry. I'm not.
It's Wednesday, September 27th, 6:30 to 8, right here.
Wednesday?
Mm-hmm. And that's all.
Okay. Supervisor DeMonts.
No report.
Oh my gosh, what happened?
I just said that to get all the looks. I really don't have a report though.
Supervisor Shepherd. No report.
It's contagious.
Supervisor Creed.
No report.
Oh.
Mercy.
Supervisor
Domino
King.
effect here.
I'd just like to thank Marty personally for all the hard work that you've been doing on this pipeline. Bless your heart. I know the last letter you wrote took you 4 hours or so. I do appreciate everything you do. And I'd like for everybody to keep the flood victims in their thoughts and prayers. I know we had some law enforcement and some other people worked for the county and the town each one, you know, they got called up. I know one personally, not to mention no names, but he was sent overseas for a year right after he got married. Bless his heart.
Yep.
They called him up the other day, and he's gone over to cut trees and stuff now for flood victims. And I'd just like for y'all to keep them in your thought and prayers.
Thank you. A couple of things. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Tommy Laughlin about the EDA. And one of the things that he wanted to know, and the EDA is wanting to know, is what role do you want them to have with us? Do you want them to just kind of manage some of the investments that we have and provide that and look at those potential opportunities? Or do you want them to try to engage and come up with future ideas and outside the box? Now, we don't need to decide tonight, but just fundamentally, what type of role do we want that board to play was one of the things that they're interested in knowing from us. And so keep that in mind. I did go to the rail meeting. It sounded very positive. Maybe we're not going to hit 2020, but we've got a shot at it. You know, rail service starts, believe it or not, a little over in a month in Roanoke. Make sure that if you can, you use that Smart Waste bus, because that directly links you to saying you're coming from the area. The other thing that I was approached about is we don't want just a platform, we want an actual train station, and that takes money. If you're building the platform like they're doing in Roanoke, that's one thing, but if you're actually having a train station, that's another, and that's something to think about in the future. But there seemed to be, at least several of the folks I talked with, an understanding that that's not a bill for just one entity, but it may be multiple entities. So who knows, it might be a Hokey Stone station that they'll pull it into. With that, there being no other business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.